What's up guys, Hutton from Fitness Culture. Today I'm going to be talking about the most common movement fault that I see in the deadlift and how to fix it. But before we get into it, and to help you increase your deadlift, we've included a free 12-week deadlift progression that you can download in the description below. Let's get into it. So first, let's go over the mistake. I see a lot of people that they're starting to pull. Right when they pull, their butt pops up, shooting their shoulders over the bar, and then really this is forcing them to be in a bad position right off the bat, not able to use your body's leverage to actually go heavier and grind that bar up. So I'm gonna show you kind of how to fix your deadlift setup and then other mistakes that we can tweak to make deadlift more efficient for you. All right, so I'm gonna bring Ashton in as a model here. He's very fitness cultured out, we'd love to see it. We went over his deadlift a little bit before this and it was actually really good, but he did the one common mistake that people do. Then we cleaned it up just a little bit. His wasn't super bad. So not even covering the stance, because to me, I like to tell people deadlift in whatever stance make you the most comfortable. But the biggest thing that we want to do is focus on having a vertical shin angle during your setup. So get into just kind of your setup before we fix it a little bit. So Ashton's setup before we fixed it, I mean, it was a little bit worse than that even. So his knee was directly over his toe, if you look here from the side in his setup. And usually that's caused by setting up, because like really, this feels like perfect form, you know? Like you're nice, you're low, your back's nice and tight. So it looks great, but it's gonna make it really hard. The first thing he's gonna have to do is he's gonna have to raise his butt to get his shins vertical so he can clear that bar past his knee. So that's gonna be the first thing. So when you set up in your stance, you wanna make sure that your butt's actually a little bit higher. So look at his angle right now. Even this angle right here is pretty perfect right now. So he's basically at a 45-degree angle right here. It seems pretty high, but really, once you get in this angle, as long as you're keeping your back tight, all you're gonna be doing from here is pushing those hips forward and bringing that bar back. And this allows you, so one thing that we went over too, is this allows Ashton, when he gets set up, to use his body's leverage, keep that bar tight to his shin, and be pulling against the bar before he even starts. All right, the next thing that's also gonna make your butt pop up is people that are coming from a more dynamic start. So that's kind of hard to do if you set up properly with your hip angle. But by dynamic start, I mean, their arms are just kind of hanging out. And when they go, they're pulling like that to get set up. So they're not tight to the bar before they start the pull. And we call that just taking the slack out of the bar. So what I like to tell people, the easiest cue here is gonna be, well, let me just show you. Come on, bro. It's another reason that you want to make sure you take the slack out of the bar, you know? You start doing that to yourself. All right, so what I like to think about to try to get the slack out of the bar, number one is going to be your upper back setup. So the other thing that's gonna force people to kind of fall forward is not setting their upper back in. So what I try to think about is taking that armpit and sinking it down to your hip pocket. So when I set up, I'll grab the bar and really try to pull some tension against the bar and set that upper back in just like that. So the bar's nice and close to my shins. It's nice and tight. I'm not just hanging out here with my arms just relaxed. Like really you wanna squeeze your shoulder blades down and back, set it in a good position, and that's gonna make your back super rigid and easier to pull off the floor. I was showing Ashton, and I think it was a little bit of a light bulb moment when I set up, if I was to set up how I would on a 700-pound deadlift on this 135, like immediately just me setting into the bar is gonna lift the bar off the ground, right? Where once the bar's filled with weight, that's gonna force me to stay tight to the bar and the bar's gonna stay on the ground, obviously. But that's kind of taking the slack out of the bar. That's kind of what we mean by that. You're gonna grab the bar and almost just my body's leverage. If you think about using your body's leverage on the deadlift, just the weight of my body is probably gonna help me with a couple 100 pounds just by sitting in the correct position. All right, so next we're gonna be going over 4, we would call them drills or techniques that I add into programming or that I do with my athletes that kind of force them to do things properly. So the best drills that you can do, obviously you can be good at giving cues, but if you give someone a drill that no matter what they do, it forces them to do it right, it makes it a little bit easier and you can create that light bulb moment for your athlete. So Ashton's gonna step in here, even though he's already got a good deadlift. I'm just gonna show you our first drill. The first drill is just gonna be a band feedback drill. And so this one, obviously, this one's not really gonna help him get a vertical shin angle. So as a coach, that is one thing you're just gonna have to cue. I would watch him set up, make sure that his hips are set up properly. But then from there, once he does get set up, I'm gonna pull the band out just slightly. And like right now, don't let me do that. I would even cue right now, I want that barbell to touch your shins. I want it to be right over, like you're the navicular bone. There you go. Touch your shins, I want you to have a vertical shin angle. And then from there, just go through a deadlift. Nice, yeah. And it's just forcing him, number one, without even telling him to do it, it's forcing him to squeeze that armpit into his back pocket. It's impossible to do this efficiently without squeezing that shoulder blade down and back. Obviously, you don't want to do a heavy band here or put a ton of tension. All you need is just a little bit of feedback, enough that if you're pulling on it, it would roll the bar away from his feet. That's all you need on this one. You don't want to go heavy. It's just one of these things to try to force them to really keep that upper back tight and to switch that light bulb on. All right, the next thing that I would do for an athlete that was having this problem is that I would program pause of the knee deadlift, just right below the knee, for a few weeks until they get it fixed. And the reason that is number one, like I said before, one of the biggest reasons that their butt pops up if someone has a dynamic start is they're pulling too fast off the floor. And they don't, I'm not saying it's bad, there's a lot of really strong deadlifters that do pull really fast and have a little bit of a dynamic start. But if you're having this issue and it's making it so you have bad form and the bar floating out, then we need to step back a little bit, drill the right form, and add these into your routine. So what we would do is just have Ashton set up. What's gonna do is gonna force him to pull slowly off the ground because he knows he's gonna pause in 6 inches, right? So he's gonna pause above the knee and then move through the entire lift. Good. It's very simple, but another thing that you'll realize is that the bar is gonna stay nice and close to your athlete's shin because no one's gonna wanna pause at the knee with the bar over their toes. So show them what that would be like, and just feel how much harder that is. If you're out here, yeah, like no one's gonna do that. And that's why we also wanna keep that bar nice and tight. Did you feel how much harder that was? Holding it here versus holding it here. So if that bar is just floating over, just biomechanically, you're just gonna be in a bad position. The closer that bar is to your shins, the more your shoulders are gonna be able, obviously you wanna start with your shoulders slightly over the bar, but your goal is to just drive your shoulders behind the bar and get your hips forward, just basically off that first pull. And this really teaches people, right when you start pulling, like Ashton's naturally, by keeping that bar close to his shins, pausing at the knee, he's gonna naturally start pulling his shoulders behind the bar instead of letting his shoulders float over the bar. All right, the next drill we like to use is called, I'm just calling it a floor to knee deadlift. So I like to program these as a drill for people to help fix their form, but then also it's nice to get a heavy barbell in your hand. Like say you're in a deadlift cycle and on Monday I lifted super heavy. Later on, the second leg day of the week, I add these just early in the program, and it's an easy way to add a really heavy partial lift into your program without causing a lot of muscle damage and soreness for the next day, because it's basically all concentric. So we're gonna show you what it looks like here. So you're gonna get set up in a nice deadlift setup, make sure everything looks good. Ashton's just gonna pull to his knee, barely pause for a count, come back down. Literally, the pause is just to show control, and then you're gonna drop back down. No control, yep, just like that. So you'll notice there's not a lot of upward movement with his hips. He's mostly just working on that first pull, getting his shoulders back behind the bar. If you have a good setup, yep, right there. It's not gonna cause a lot of soreness in your low back, and it's a great way for number one to get a heavy bar in your hands, and then also just drilling it for guys that you need to get some more time under the bar, because deadlifting is a skill, right? So practicing that skill multiple times a week is very beneficial. So throwing this on a second day of the leg day of the week lets you add that skill practice in again without causing a lot of soreness. So the last thing we're gonna talk about is adding deficit deadlifts into your program. And I wouldn't say that this is gonna fix your form, but for somebody who's already proficient at setting up and has a pretty good deadlift, it's gonna reinforce the ability to stay perfect off the ground. And so the reason that is, it's kind of the same as pulling that band to pull the bar out. Getting in a perfect setup on a deficit deadlift, the first thing you're gonna have to think about is pressing your hips forward and really grinding your shoulders back behind the bar and using your body's leverage on the bar to have a successful lift. And that's really what it is. This is teaching you to really use leverage on the bar to lift heavy, because just getting set up, we haven't set up yet. So let's see if Ashton can get a good setup on the deficit. Yeah, that looks really good. Squeeze your shoulder blade. So he's, again, you're not gonna wanna do this with somebody that's having trouble setting up, because this is just gonna make it even harder to set up. Get that bar close to your shin, vertical shin. And then from here, he's just gonna stand straight up. But I don't know if you felt it, but typically it's gonna make you feel like your shoulders, it's gonna make you have your shoulders a little bit further over the bar to get set up, just because you are on the deficit. And so the first thing that you're gonna wanna do on that pull is get your shoulders behind the bar to create a good lift. So what we typically do, if we do, like let's say the 12-week deadlift progression that we have for free in a download, we would start somebody by building them up through the weeks, off the floor, 2 inches, 4-inch deficit, work that for a little bit, get strong there, then build them back down to the 2-inch, down to the floor. And by the time you get back down to the floor, it just feels like your form feels so perfect off the ground, and you're so much stronger off that first pull. All right guys, just to recap, my top 4 tips were start off with that band feedback drill, then you'll move into a pause of the knee deadlift, you can add a floor to knee deadlift and then also deficit deadlifts. All right, I hope some of these tips helped you guys out, and I hope you can use them in your program to help clean up your deadlift a little bit. Just remember, we do have a download if you guys want to check it out. It's a 12-week progression where we do use a lot of deficit deadlift techniques in that progression. So it's a pretty fun one, and I've used it a lot to get my deadlift stronger. So check that out. We do have some exciting topics that we're going to cover soon, but if you guys have anything that you want me to cover, let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to get to them. Thanks.